Do more, be better. The podcast where we explore the intersection of business, technology, and personal growth and how they shape our lives, families, and careers. Every week, we dive into the stories of entrepreneurs and innovators who are redefining what it means to achieve professional success while maintaining personal fulfillment. Welcome. Let's get into it. Jamaal Jordan is a patent attorney who was a partner at a large law firm and recently accepted a position to go in-house and manage an internal patent portfolio at a Fortune 100 company. I'm super excited to catch up with an old friend and get his thoughts on law, family, and life. Welcome, Jamaal.
Thanks, Sal. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I'm sure we're going to catch up on the calamity that is the U.S. soccer men's national team and, you know, life and kids and all this stuff. So it's going to be fun today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I guess this is the new way. Podcast is the way old friends catch up together.
Yeah. No more text messages, no more Facebook. You just do a podcast, and that's how you actually talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. It's you build community, you build brand at the same time. So it's perfect.
Hey, works for me.
So the way I like to always start the podcast is to give the audience a feel of more than Jamaal, the patent attorney. And so one of the things I always like to ask is, what's your favorite thing to do when you're not working?
It's good question. So with after COVID, our world's kind of shrunk, and me probably more than necessary. And I'm at home a lot, so I try, and I'm in this room a lot when I'm working. So I just try to get out of it, whether it's going to get a little workout in, relaxing to watch some sports or TV. Of course, hanging out with the family. My girls are both in competitive cheer, so it's a lot. It's very taxing financially, but it's also from a time standpoint. They're doing stuff almost every day and ripping and running, taking them here and there. So that's usually where you can find me if I'm not working.
It's good to find moments in time away from work, away from the hectic family life, where you can give yourself a brief moment of solitude, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
You have two girls, right?
Yes, it is.
How did they get into cheer?
Well, they rebelled against the sports that I wanted them to get into. So the youngest one, Cassie, I tried to get her into soccer, and it's an ongoing effort. She's still my last hope. My oldest, Parker, that was the initial effort. She doesn't really like running and sweating a whole lot, so soccer was out. The youngest one is a little bit more into trying to please daddy, so I don't think she likes it either, but I'm close. I'm close to getting her, but it was just trial and error. They tried that. I think they were doing gymnastics. They like the aspects of gymnastics, but like the tumbling and things like that. But I guess maybe not so much of some of the other stuff. And they just stumbled upon cheer as a kind of a related sport, and they just love it. They love the cheer company does a really good job of community. It's like a bunch of different teams together, and they have names, and there's just a real good sense of community. So the girls they met a lot of friends, and
That's awesome. You're in the St. Louis suburbs, so is this like travel soccer where you're driving all over the Midwest for events, or like how competitive is this?
So it's evolved. This was their third year. So the first one, half of a year, was they tried it out just to see if they liked it. Then they got on what's called the novice level. So the level of traveling there was mostly just local. We went to Chicago once or twice, and then Kansas City once. They recently made elite level. So that's official travel soccer. We're going to Orlando. We're going to Kansas City, Chicago multiple times, Indianapolis, I think multiple times. I said Kansas City, or Nashville. Go to Nashville once. So it's a significant financial endeavor, and then just going everywhere and traveling. So it's been a lot, but like I said, they love it. So I've had to embrace it myself, and it's impressive. The stuff that some of the older, like the high school level, teams can do. Some of the most athletic stuff you'll see on the floor. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've always found it really impressive. My wife, as you know, Pamela, she danced all through life.
Mm-hmm.
In college, she did cheer, like competitive. It's really intense. I mean, like it's true athlete. It's not just, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
even know how to explain it, but it's impressive to see how much they can do.
right, right. No, it's the whole mentality. It's no different than you would sit in a soccer practice. Those coaches, they're yelling and they're pulling everything out of their athletes the same way you would do it any other sport. So it opened my eyes. Yeah, I was an ignorant guy as to the type of a sport, but there's no air quotes. It's legit.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I've tried to improve over my career as a lawyer and just in life is exactly what you said, which is like ignorance. Try to eliminate as much of it and like just keep your mind open instead of being
Hmm.
like, why would you do that? Or forcing your kid to go down the path you want them to go down.
Hmm.
And just embracing being kind of the best dad I can be and cheering on my kids and, making sure that they're as happy as can be. And so I applaud again. These cheer puns are so good. I
Yeah,
applaud you embracing that with your $2, even if you are still trying to brainwash the soccer into the
yeah,
the
yeah.
youngest one.
Just a little bit. I haven't given up, but I'm not letting it override. So we'll see. TBD. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Roan to do more of it. She's actually pretty good at it,
Uh-huh.
and she's a pretty athletic kid, and she likes it, but she likes so many other things that it's hard to get her to like focus on one thing, obviously, and that's fine. But
Right.
we were watching the beginning of the Olympics, and I tried to put on the women's national team, and she was like, "Go back to gymnastics, go back to gymnastics," and I was like, just watch a little. She's like, I don't want to. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. But I'm trying to get her on board because we have the World Cup coming.
Mhm.
And besides the incredible amount of money that it's going to cost me to go to even one game,
Right.
let alone try to get her to really enjoy it. But I want her to experience that because I remember when we were kids, '94. I didn't get
Hmm.
to go, but it was such a big deal, and I loved soccer growing up, but I still remember it so viscerally, and so I
Hmm.
want to make sure she at least understands the game enough that she can get connected to it, and it's not very far away. It's only a couple years away,
Right.
and although that does lead us into, the U.S. men's national team, who has managed to have maybe the most talented generation of players ever, and still totally fuck it up. For those of you looking for our conversation on patents, skip to the 15:33-minute mark. For those of you that want to listen to us rant about U.S. soccer, listen along for the fun.
I mean, that's the truth. I agree. I mean, you know my love for some of the older players, and I would probably put one in particular over anybody in this. In this,
Mr. DeMarcus
that
Beasley.
would be it. That would be it. But I do agree overall. Yes, the most talented team we've had. It's just I don't know. It's a lack of identity or grit or what it is, but they just have not been able to translate into success. And the fire Greg Berhalter. I don't know where they're going right now. I know you're more critical of the management than the players. I kind of see it all as one big thing. So I'm skeptical. I'm pessimistic more so that we're going to be able to turn this around in the next couple of years.
Yeah, for me, I've always viewed it as like any other organization, right? And so like when you are building a business or building a company or building a team,
Mm-hmm.
right? You find the best talent you can, and as long as they give you effort, then
Mm-hmm.
it's on leadership to pull out the best out of them, right? And from what I've seen, I haven't seen malcontent players who aren't
Mm-hmm.
giving effort. They play hard and they really enjoy each other. They just don't seem to get unlocked. And I think some of that is tactics
Mm-hmm.
and some of that is just the feeling of like the coach and inexperience, quite frankly. But I think it also beyond the like US coach, it goes back all the way up to the organization, which has been this sort of old school model of you hire your friends and buddies
Yeah.
and like it just doesn't work, and we haven't been able to coalesce around like this is the path forward like so many other countries, and
Yeah.
I think that's a big problem with the US soccer team.
Yeah, that's a good point because I think what they tried to do was try to change some of that, but they didn't really go all the way. They're like, okay, we're going to deviate from the defense oriented, pack the back and then try to counterattack and just try not to give games away and play for ties. Maybe I get a sneak a goal in here. We got more talent. We tried to play more possession style, but it's still just the holdover of the old regime where they just didn't jump all the way into we're gonna get it. We're gonna have a new philosophy here. So they're caught in between, and it's I think it's showing. Although I'm being a little bit pessimistic and downer, but if one or two things don't go so poorly as they did, I think they have a pretty good tournament this last tournament. If Weah doesn't do what he does and they get to actually play a team with their full strength, they win that game, and then who knows against Uruguay in their last game. So I don't want to say it's completely dead, but I get very excited when these tournaments roll around and something just always happens.
I know, but I mean that's a perfect example. Like we come out of the World Cup, the youngest team in the World Cup, did better than expected.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of saying, okay, what do we need to unlock this team to the next level? We do what the U.S. has always done, which is like, let's just run it back. We don't have to pay him very much money.
Yeah.
The players like him. And there was a lack of discipline. I think that's some of what you got with Weah. Some of the other, like pontificators on the internet have said, the team looked like it got comfortable. Mm. And I think we are always, whether in sports or in business and life, when we let ourselves get too comfortable, you don't get the best out of yourself. It's good to be a little uncomfortable because it means you're always learning and trying to improve. And I do think that was part of the problem. And, I think you're being a little nice on this team is like they were the most talented or one of the most talented teams in this Copa. And they played like crap. I mean, like, there's just no other way to say it. The players didn't play well. The tactics were bad. The discipline was bad. And for me, I'm glad they fired him. I mean, at least that's a slight change.
Yeah.
Old U.S., organization would have just been like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. So now who they hire is a whole other thing. I know they're trying to get Klopp and all the rest of it. And very unlikely anybody that level is going to come and coach the U.S. team. But, if you look at the U.S. women's national team, I mean, they installed a new coach like 5 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was like yesterday.
But she changed formation. She changed tactics. She changed players. She didn't say, hey, you've been here before. You get to come. And now look at them. Right?
Yeah.
Now, talent, they're very good, obviously.
Yeah. You're right. If I would have looked there and I would go position by position, I think that the men's national team, they're not comparably as talented as the women's national team is compared to the rest of the world. 100% true. But they can hold their own. You go position by position. Christian I was skeptical of him in the beginning, but that was because he was coming of age. You still had Landon, you still had Dempsey, and he was trying to find his way, and they were in his position. They were in his spot. They were taking, the possession that he needed. He's convinced me. Like I feel comfortable him leading the team now. It's just feeling around him and, like you said, getting that organization, finding the coach, just being able to unlock him, finding a 9, unlocking if it's Balogun or whoever else they want to put there. Because we've talked about that over years. We just never felt like we had a 9 who could you got him the ball, he could turn, he could fire, and you gave him 3 opportunities, he was going to put at least one of them away.
I mean, we've talked about this endlessly. I mean, like one of the most famous goals ever is against Algeria with Landon cleaning it up. But we both agree, like if it was any 9, would have missed that kick every single time. And I think that's part of the problem is like you see other countries really say, okay, who are our best players? 2 or 3. Let's build teams around them.
Yeah.
We tend to do, we're going to play this formation, this tactic. We're going to do this thing or this, paid his dues and therefore should be on this team. And I just think that it's so short-sighted. And now we have a World Cup where, are we ever going to wake up the sleeping elephant or whatever you want to call it? I'm doubtful. I mean, there's just so much more money, at least in the U.S., in basketball especially, and football and the like, and baseball, that it's kind of hard if I'm a up-and-coming talented player, am I going to make a choice? You look at the Kobe's of the world and the rest of it, right?
Right.
So, but the World Cup is supposed to be that next click. 94 gave us MLS. We've had all this time to improve, and the product is pretty good. It's not the top 3 leagues in Europe, but it's probably the 4th or 5th best league in the world. It's pretty good product.
I agree.
And so can you unlock the next level of that with talent and players, and I don't know. But again, we don't need to spend the whole podcast talking about soccer, because I know you and I can rant on this
Yeah,
for
yeah, it's
probably
yeah.
forever.
And
But
I've tried to separate after the co. I tried to separate myself from it, so I've been purposely not thinking about it. I just wanted they're going to tell me who's coming next, and then I'm just going to wait and see.
yeah, well, at least there's something we can always trick ourselves into looking forward to. It's like the same thing. You
Hmm.
love a team, whether it's your local sports team or
Yeah,
your kids team or the U.S. men's national team,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, it'll be better this time, and you trick yourself into it, and at least that gives you a little bit of hope, right?
That listen, you're talking to the hope mongler because I'm, Michigan, my Detroit Lions since I was a little kid, and they turned it around. Now I'm wary to put that out there in the ether because they've got another year coming up and they could just miraculously fall back into destitute. But if they can do it, the U.S. men's national team can do it.
I mean, how amazing would it be for the U.S. men's national team to make it even to like a quarterfinal in the United
Yeah,
States? I mean, I think that would be pretty amazing.
I drive and just sit outside the stadium. I don't need to be in it. I just circle around in my car.
Anyway, let's get us back on track on something
It's,
that is not U.S. men's national
okay,
team
all
soccer,
right,
because this is
perfect.
not a soccer podcast.
No,
Although maybe it should be a soccer podcast. So I know you are a patent lawyer, and we went to law school together. Tell me a little bit about how you become a patent lawyer, because you can't just go to law school and then do a patent thing, can you?
so there are. I like to, well, I don't like to, but the industry generally breaks patent law into two categories. You can be a patent practitioner, a patent prosecutor, or you can do litigation. You can litigate patent cases. And in that case, you go to law school, you become a patent litigator. There's no additional bar or additional hurdle necessarily that you have to do. If you enjoy litigation and you want to do some of the more technical style litigation, you can do patent litigation. I am a patent prosecutor. So what that means is I can practice before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. In order to do that, you have to have a technical background. So technical background, and generally speaking, is an engineering degree or hard science degree, chemistry, biology. My particular degree is a biomedical engineering. So it's basically like a mechanical engineering degree with a lot of biology, anatomy, physiology type classes. A good friend of mine became a doctor. Some go work for like um, orthopedic companies or medical device companies, things like that. So I have this technical background. I can sit for the patent. I sat for the patent bar. In addition to the bar exam that every lawyer takes in their various jurisdictions, you have to sit for a second bar exam, which is called the patent bar, so you can then practice before the Patent and Trademark Office. So I did that after a few years of practice, and then now I've got my patent number, and I can advocate for my clients at the patent office to try and obtain patent protection for them.
And does that mean that because your background is biomedical engineering, you're doing biomedical engineering patent prosecution, or can you just need some sort of science degree?
So in my case, a lot of my clients were in the medical industry. They were, they had some type of medical device or some physiological process that they were doing. I've also, by virtue of the clients that the firm had, have a very heavy, just general mechanical and electrical background as far as products and inventions that the various companies and individuals were coming up with. So it ranged from huge manufacturing facilities with robots and all these moving mechanical and electrical parts to very simple masks and clothing, and just it's really the full gamut. But you find a way to market yourself with any business. So I marketed myself having a biomedical engineering degree to have an expertise in that technology. So that was beneficial for me from obtaining clients and just understanding the technology. I studied it in school. I had an affinity for it. So those clients, were of my particular interest, but really any mechanical electrical company and product is something I've had experience for. You really draw the line. You say, okay, you've got that, and then there's the people with the chem bio degrees. They're isolated. You have your biochemistry, your biology. Those individuals will typically only do that type of work because it's so highly specialized.
And when you say patent prosecution, explain that. I mean, as I understand it, you create a patent, it's got a bunch of words, diagrams, you submit it to the office, but like, what is your role in that?
So that's a good question because the word prosecution can be a little bit misleading. The lay person, the lawyer thinks prosecutor. I'm the state's attorney. I'm prosecuting a person in court. This prosecution is an agency. I'm prosecuting it at the patent office. So what it means is a person or a company, they have an R&D department, or they have come up with this idea, this invention. And what what they should do is they should find a patent attorney who can then turn that idea, that product, that process, that invention into what's called a patent application that can then be submitted to the patent office. So the prosecution side of my job is just the back and forth with the patent office. So I've conferred with my client. I've gotten all the information about their invention. I've produced this document, which I can kind of get into if you like, about the kind of bones and structures of that document. Then I submit that document to the patent office, and then years later, sometimes they look at it and we do this dance where they say, okay, I've looked at what you think you've invented. I've looked at my database and I found prior art, these prior inventions, these prior applications that I think already show what you're saying you've invented. That's usually how it goes. Then the ball gets put back in my court, and I say, well, either I agree, I didn't find that when I was looking, so I need to amend. I need to find another aspect of my already disclosed invention to try and distinguish from what they're now presenting to me as being already out there and preventing me from getting a patent. So we go this back and forth until hopefully I'm able to convince the patent office that this aspect of this invention it's new, it's non-obvious, and it's useful. Those are the requirements for obtaining a patent. I've convinced them that all those things are met, and I should be able to get a patent. And that's pretty much my job.
So let's break that down, those three things. If I'm starting a business or I have an idea, let's start with first, why do I need to hire an attorney to help me with a patent? Right? Can I just apply on my own? Can I use one of these apps and services? Like, what's the benefit of you?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's got a lot of different layers to it because it depends on where you are. So, because I counsel Fortune, 100 companies, I counsel solo inventors, and the answer is often different depending on where you are. So when you're just an individual looking to try, you've got an idea and you want to get it patented, and you've got limited resources usually. So it's a question of where do I devote those resources? And I'm usually of the mindset that you want to make sure you've got the business side down. You want to make sure you're addressing the business side, and then when you've decided this is worth it, then you come talk to me. Because even though I love the industry, patents are very, very beneficial, we'll get into, but it's not a smoking gun of I have a patent and I'm going to make a ton of money. Patents don't allow you to do anything, actually. Patents are a right to exclude. So I do all this work and I get this patent. Well, it doesn't actually mean I can do anything with that patent. What it does mean is I can tell you can't do anything. You can't practice this invention that I've lined out. But it doesn't mean I can practice it because someone 10 years ago may have invented the base technology that I've now improved upon, and they might still have a patent on that. So I actually can't even practice my invention until I contract with them, obtain a license, buy their patent, do whatever business side I need to do. But that's a misconception people tend to have that I have this idea, I got to get a patent, and they're important. They can be very beneficial in business. You either get your market share because you're first to the market, and clients or companies have, not companies, but people have associated your product or your service with you, or you have this great and unique product, whether you were first or not, but you've got something that no one else has. And in that case, you've got to get a patent on it because your entire market share is predicated on the fact that your product, your service is unique. So patents allow you to protect that.
Jamaal, we've talked about why you would come to a patent prosecution attorney, but what are you tactically doing to get a patent on file and eventually approved?
So there's a general process that I try to follow that puts the client in the best position possible to ultimately obtain patent protection. So they're going to come to me and they're going to say, I've invented this product, this process. I'm going to recommend that we conduct a search because, as I've mentioned, as most people will probably assume, patents are expensive. And you don't want, or trying to obtain a patent is expensive, and you might not actually get one. So you want to make sure that you do your work on the front end before you invest a significant amount of money. So what I'll suggest initially is a search. So usually if it's a solo inventor, they'll say, well, yeah, I've Googled, I've looked, there's nothing out there on this. This is completely new. And that's maybe true. That just means there's nobody commercializing it on the internet. But that doesn't mean that someone 15 years ago didn't apply for a patent application, file it at the patent office, and then maybe do nothing with it, and it published, and now it's prior art. So I'm going to do a search in the USPTO. If I think maybe any other country databases are necessary, maybe I'll do a global search and I'll look to see what's out there. And what that does is it allows me to focus on the differences between the invention and what's out there, because you've got to tell that story. I need to be able to say, the invention includes all these features, and these features are important because prior to that, no one had this. They had these problems because they didn't include this feature. We now have this feature or this interconnection of components that allows us so much better performance or result. And I only know that because I did the search on the front end, and I had a good idea. I'm probably not going to find everything, but I have a good idea what's out there, so I can tailor the application to those aspects that I believe are new, which might be different from what the client was telling me was new, from what they thought. So the search is really important because it gives me targets to shoot at. And then once I do that, now I can draft the application. The patent application includes what's called a written description. So I'm writing out what the thing looks like. It has these two sections of the body. This connects to this, and it does all these great things. At the end of a patent application are what's called the claims. The claims are numbered paragraphs in words that describe what I think is the invention. So it can be maybe it's a water bottle. It's a water bottle that has body that defines like a receptacle, and maybe the new thing is this top that allows you to turn it weird or new so you can drink it different ways. It has a top of the first section, and the second section is rotatable with respect to the first section to expose an opening. So you write out what is new, what's not being shown in all the prior art. You write those out, and that's what the patent office is going to look at. And because I did that search on the front end, I know what to focus in on my claims to give myself the best chance of getting and ultimately an issue patent. From start to finish, you know what to shoot at. You write it in that with that in mind, and then hopefully that'll cut down on the time that it takes with that back and forth with the patent office and result in a patent.
I'm just curious, do you have any idea how often you file a patent and it just gets approved without any back and forth? Does it ever happen?
It does. So that's called a first action allowance. I will say in my career, when it's the first impression, it's the first time I filed on this invention. Because if you file a continuation, you can get them often because you've already gone through the process and you know what's patentable at that point. But if it's the first time I filed on this application, on this invention, I've probably had that happen. And it's claim one. It's the broadest stroke of the invention. You might get some of your dependent claims, but your broadest, idea of what your invention is. It's happened 3 times over the last 17 plus years. So that rarely happens.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, over hundreds of applications, thousands of applications filed. Yeah.
Which is again why it's important to have somebody that can help you through the actual part of the patent getting approved versus just the creation of it and submission.
Yes, that is true.
I do think one of the problems for a lot of founders is the legal industry is such that they're not always getting clear answers as to what and not to do. And I think grounding it in business is important in every legal field, including patents, which is like, just because you can get the patent doesn't mean you necessarily should, or that it's going to even benefit you. Maybe there's a place for it, but you should evaluate it with somebody. For me, I think the follow up question for that is, okay, so let's say I've decided I do think there's value in the patent. What is the reason I hire somebody like you?
You mentioned that as versus clicking some ready-made internet click. That's you dump in some document and they reproduce. I've never used it, so I don't even know what they reproduce, but it can't be very good. So it's because the patent process is incredibly time intensive and expensive, and it's really expensive on the back end. My understanding of those ready-made programs, they're really meant to just get you something on file, because that's important. When you've got an invention and you want to make sure you get priority, you want to get your application filed, because if you're the first to file, you've got the priority to that invention. They're good at just getting something filed, but that's just the beginning. That's not even the beginning. That's just one early stage of the process. You need skilled, experienced patent attorneys, because the real work is once you get that rejection. The real work is having someone who knows how to ask the right questions in the beginning to tease out why your seemingly small change is such a big deal. Because while we joke about me not being a real attorney, like there's a lot of persuasion and creativity that go into trying to convince another scientist why the fact that you used a bolt rather than glue is so inventive and so important. So you need to spend the time. You need to have someone who's done it a really long time and who understands the case law and who's going to be able to zealously and competently advocate for you at the patent office. And you're not going to get that outside of going to a private an individual who has dedicated themselves to doing that.
And the process is you apply, and once it's reviewed by another scientist, a person in the patent office, correct?
Yes, yeah, they're called patent examiners. They will also typically have a hard science background, because they're getting all of these inventions. They've got to understand. They get all these patent applications. They've got to be able to read them and understand what's going on. So if I don't have a chemical engineering background, I'm not going to, and you produce some chemical formula or some change, or using that to treat something, or using it to provide some therapeutic, I'm not going to have any idea what that means if I don't have a baseline of understanding in that industry. So, yes.
And you said there are three things that you have to prove to get a patent. So let's talk about those three things. Can you summarize them?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so it's useful. It has to be useful. It has to be novel, which just means new, and it has to be non-obvious. So useful is a pretty low bar. I've invented something that other people can use that can benefit them in some way. It can benefit a process, a product, an industry. That's a pretty low standard to make. Modify the television to where I can get a clearer picture. It has use in providing better entertainment and viewing quality for someone. Where the fight at the patent office happens is with new and non-obvious, or novel and non-obvious. So that just means novel, new, pretty clear. It's not out there already. And that just means, okay, I've said that I've invented television with this type of projector. Well, is this projector out there? No. All right, so it meets the new standpoint. The harder hurdle to beat is the non-obvious, because with just about anything, I mean, we've been inventing and creating things for a long time in this world. You're going to, and scientists are pulling, you're as smart as your experiences. So they're pulling ideas and concepts from their environment. So you're going to be able to find probably a similar technology or a similar feature in other industries or in other products. But And the examiner is usually going to say, okay, yeah, it's new. TVs haven't done this, but I saw that in computer monitors or on phones. The way you're projecting that light or whatever you're doing was in something else. It would have been obvious to apply that technology that's in phones to your TV. So I don't think you should get a patent for that reason. So then I've got to say, oh, you got me there. I think that is everybody knew to do that. Or no, that's actually not true. You couldn't do that because of the mechanics or whatever is there to where that's not actually something people would have thought to do because it would have for X, Y, and Z reasons. You've got to understand the technology. You've got to understand how to persuasively communicate, whether it be written or verbally. We have calls like this with examiners all the time where we're explaining our inventions and trying to advocate and distinguish over what they're saying is not new and or obvious. So yeah, that's that. Those are the three features, and it's the most of the action is in that non-obvious bucket.
Is it something that you can leverage technology to help you on the front end before you get to the examiner, or where does technology fit in the patent prosecution ecosystem?
Yes, the short answer to your question is yeah. There are a lot of companies or a lot of products that help with the drafting of a patent application. So, taking a step back. So, a patent application is a word and picture document where I am describing my invention by referencing pictures and images. So, for the type of inventions that I work on, there's usually going to be a series of computer generated images of the device, of the product. I'm going to show it at different angles. Maybe I pull some pieces off of it so I can see internally, so I can get a full picture of what that thing looks like. And then I'm gonna describe it. I'm gonna say in figure one, there's a body that has this shape. There's this bolt that's a you're not getting that, but you're explaining what's important about the invention. And there are products that can help you organize the application into the different sections. So the written description section, there is a section in the back with claims. You've got to put numbers on the drawings. There are products that help you with the drawings and being able to reference the numbers that you give all of the features into your application, double checking those things. So cutting the time down to draft after you've done all the mental work to figure out how to describe it, cutting some of the formal aspects of it, the numbering and the organization. There's ways to cut down, use technology to cut that down. That gives you the structure, the template outline for the application. After that, you kind of just have to use your brain. People get into trouble the age of AI and Chat GPT and all these other programs where you rely on that. You're giving away confidential information, and you can get into a lot of trouble leveraging technology too much. But there are definitely ways to do it correctly.
If you have an idea and it hasn't been patented and you disclose it externally, does that invalidate your patent?
That is a very good question. And that was actually, I'm glad you asked that because that was when we were talking about the things you should be thinking about when you've got an idea and how valuable patents are and just that process. That's a, a lesser known aspect of it, but it's very important because the answer to your question is yes, it does. So there's a thing called public disclosure or sale or on sale bar. You want to make sure you keep your idea, your product confidential. So, because if you don't, the timeline to when you can appropriately file for protection starts to go. So you get a year. If you disclose, if you've got this idea, and maybe you go to a trade show and you put up your poster board and you kind of show your new idea. You got this business and you want to try and get some traction and you show your invention there. You can do that, but it's prudent practice to have previously filed an application before you do any of that because on that date that you disclose, you're now starting the timeline to where you have to file an application or you will be foreclosed to because that prior disclosure will be prior art and you won't be able to protect it. So, and if you want to do it globally, then you've got to file the application before because there's some countries that will prevent you from filing at all if you previously disclosed it. So if you're talking to people, so your next question might be, well, I've got a company, I've got a business, I've got to talk to people, I've got to tell somebody about it. so I can maybe get investors or try and get manufacturers and all those types of things. You can definitely do that. That's why they have non-disclosure agreements in place. That's effectively keeping it confidential or keeping it private and not disclosing.
It's an interesting thing I've seen as I've gotten more and more into the artificial intelligence stuff is like this idea that putting information into one of the models is
Mm-hmm.
potentially disclosure. Even though it's technology, you are putting it out there, especially if the models are training on your input, like ChatGPT does if you don't pay for the service. And
Mm-hmm.
so uh, I think for a lot of our audience that is building companies, novel ideas, they're not necessarily ginormous companies. You're trying to figure out a way to do this in a set of constraints. You only have so much money, maybe none. You have an
Mm-hmm.
idea, so you need to hire a lawyer to get a patent. You're trying to use something like AI to reduce that cost or help you figure out that idea. And then you potentially have risked that prior art and that disclosure. For all of those listening, though, but from what I hear from you is, at least in the United States, if you have done that, as long as you get the application on file within a certain time period, you can still protect it. Or if you are discussing it with investors, as long as you're under some sort of NDA, you can also forehold that time clock starting.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, that public disclosure can certainly happen. You just want to protect yourself on the front end by filing that application and being able to say that you beat the date that you disclosed. So, yeah.
So, like a lot of technology, it sounds like if you have 100% of the patent prosecution process that you can potentially optimize, you can use technology to optimize maybe half of it, maybe less than half of it. But then there's a big chunk that's just back and forth humans talking about what you've submitted to the patent office and trying to determine whether there is a patent, right?
Yes, yeah. There's only so much the technology can do for all those other reasons. The fact that you want to keep things confidential, being you leveraging technology a little too much can get you into trouble. You can definitely use it to kind of help the drafting process from a structural standpoint and getting everything that all checking all the boxes for the different sections. But when it comes down to getting a patent, you're going to get to the point where yes, it's the way you've been able to describe it and the way you can convey that invention to the examiner, to the patent office, is what's going to carry the day.
I think something you said earlier, which is you're as smart as your experience, is part of this conversation as to why you might want to use experienced patent prosecution lawyer, which is, some of this is not just in the back and forth, but it's in the nuance of knowing, like, oh, I've dealt with this patent examiner before. They really care about this thing for some reason, or I know this kind of invention is going to require this kind of length because I've done this 50 times before. And so I'm curious for you, as we come into this age of more and more technology and sort of self serve, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think patent prosecution is going to go? Like, how is that going to work? Especially as you move in house now and you're managing a portfolio. Do you think that the way we get patents will change?
I mean, man, that's $1 billion question, and I don't know. Like so when I started patents, the value of patents, almost, universally was at its all-time high. Companies, individuals, they were willing to pay premium to obtain and get patent protection. That value has kind of steadily creeped down. It's kind of holding at we know at the level of, yeah, we know patents are important, but I'm only really willing to spend on core, company foundationally important technology. I'm not so much willing to pay a lot for just obtaining a large patent portfolio for the sake of maybe defensive purposes to keep my competitor out. I'm more so focused on spending the money where I know I have a product or a process coming out to protect it. And doing that, companies' budgets have shrunk. So I think just as a whole, I think the patent industry has lost a little of its value. Um, like as a whole, it's still incredibly important when it's your foundational technology. It is a must have. I think 100% companies, individuals are going to try to find it to that point. They're going to try to find a way to bring some of that in house, or streamline some of that, or make it easier, make it cheaper, make it more accessible. So yeah, I can definitely see down the line someone at least trying to maybe cut out some of the law firms work. Now, that's the LegalZooms and the things of that nature have tried that already to some success, but I think the next step might be the companies trying to just create ways to do a little bit more of that in-house with smaller budgets and less people. So how they leverage technology or do that, and I guess how I will leverage technology to do that, no, that's going to be my new role. Remains to be seen, but there is definitely going to be an emphasis on trying to more efficiently and more cheaply protect our inventions.
If you're a college student and headed into law school and you really want to be a patent prosecutor, what's your thoughts on law firm versus in-house?
Mm-hmm. So, well, my perspective and kind of what my plan was when I started, and I think my experiences, bear this out to, I would say it's still applicable now, is that starting off at a law firm is going to give you the experience and the knowledge that is necessary either to stay there, you grow your business, you enjoy private practice, and you can flourish that way. I think in patent law specifically, in patent prosecution specifically, personally, I think you have to start off at a law firm. You're just not going to get the varied experience. You're not going to be able to learn from the older attorneys in the same way as if you were to just go in-house. And because in-house, they're typically build their departments off of associates and partners who have worked there, because they're not in the business of training and teaching people how to practice law. They are in the business of using lawyers to further their business efforts. So you almost have to, you've got to go to law firm because you've got to learn the business. So there are some that go into private or go in-house first, but they're going to usually just be managing. I think they do themselves a disservice because they're not able to identify the issues and properly manage outside counsel, because they weren't outside counsel themselves. They're missing things that they might otherwise be able to catch if they at least at one point were on the other side. So I say law firm, then in-house if you're going to go along that.
Well, if you go into law firm world, there's also a lot of other ancillary requirements or impact on you beyond the day-to-day work. And so I know you have young kids, and how have you managed to become a partner at a large firm and build a practice, which I understand you're leaving now, but still against raising kids and being present for them?
It's been a process. And I would say the kind of transition point was really COVID, because before that, I would say it was difficult to give the full force and the full effort and energy necessary on the family side, as well as work. I found myself in the office, till 8, 9 o'clock often, trying to, make sure I got everything done, build my hours, and satisfied all the client requirements and responsibilities that I had. Although COVID was a global catastrophe, one of my personal benefits from it was it brought me closer to my family. Like I mentioned before, I'm in this room more than I should be, but the good thing is this room is very close to my daughters and my wife that are here most of the time if they're not at school or at work. I'm grateful for that because I was able to kind of reconnect. You only get, I think about, I was listening to another podcast about a real estate podcast and people investing, and how you only get those 18 summers with your kids. And I've been able to kind of compact that over the last 4 years, for better or worse. They get on my nerves sometimes, but we're around each other quite a lot over these last 4 years. It's been easier more recently to do that. I think in general, the typical way of practice, it becomes difficult. It's just a lot that's required. Patent law intellectually is very taxing. I always say if you want the TV leisure style lawyer where they're doing, the partner life where they have these clients and they're just kind of sitting back and going to golf and having meetings with people. That's not patent. That's not patent prosecution. You're writing research papers all the time, and that's taxing, and it's time consuming. So it takes away from some of the other aspects of life. But luckily, more recently, been able to flip that a little, and we'll see what happens going in house and how that balance happens. But hopefully, I'm able to continue some of that because it's important. Life is precious, as you know. Family members are not, promised with you for your entire life, so you want to maximize the time you have with them when you can.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever a perfect balance, even not being part of law firm world anymore, I still work a lot. I just have more
Mm-hmm.
flexibility in kind of how I do that. And I think that's kind of the key portion of it is finding a way to manage time and again, be as present as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've also found that was interesting. I was just thinking about this and talking to this with a friend is there's this sort of epidemic of loneliness in the world right now. And a lot of people blame remote work
Mm-hmm.
or, the ecosystem of being online constantly or whatever it might be. But, I was thinking about it and like, for me, I'm alone a lot, like way more than if you actually think about it, even with family here like you, or like I'm in my office, I'm working or I'm on calls or whatever, but I don't feel alone because I have a lot of meaning in what I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing. And I think one of the things that I've always heard because I've known you a long time is you really love patents and the stuff to the point that I couldn't fathom it. Like sometimes I was like that because I've seen patents. They are
Yeah,
they
they're
are
exciting.
not interesting. I'm sorry, they are not. And it's also this language. Why didn't you just write that like a normal human? Well, you're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to. Okay, well, my brain hurts. But you really enjoy it. And so I'm just curious, is part of what has allowed you to be more present in your life is also finding meaning in work?
Yes, I mean it's very difficult work, as you've explained. You have to love it because I've interviewed many very intelligent individuals. I've had summer interns and younger associates, and this job is not for everybody. But if you're doing it with a higher purpose in mind, it is much easier to do. It is much easier to stay and continue to write these weird sentences about things that comprise and the first and the second and all of these types of things when you know what you're doing it for. And I definitely became a better patent attorney once I got a family. Right, as a young single guy hanging out with you, I was probably not that great of.
Hey.
So yeah, having a why to why you do anything, why we work, why we make any investments in our time and our money, having a reason why you do it to support and provide and show example to our offspring and our family and our friends and the community as a whole gives you energy, gives you drive. Yeah, like I said, it makes you not you're sitting alone. You're not around a person, but there's a mental and emotional group that's around you that make it. So yeah, I agree.
Let's get off patents for a little while.
Okay,
And
if we must.
I, I'm curious, what made you get into biomedical engineering, right? I always find it interesting to learn why people make the choices they make, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like me, I sort of like fell into being a broadcast journalism major because I like sports. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be on TV, I'm going to do sports, right? Didn't end up doing that, but regardless, versus why did you choose biomedical engineering?
So I've always liked science, and of those sciences, biology was really, it piqued my interest, and I was good at it. I understood the concepts and the theories and all of the cellular talk and all those types of things. So I originally wanted to go to school for just biology. My biology teacher, uh, rightly or wrongly, advised me that there was not a whole lot of money in biology alone. So I said, well, I like biology, but I'd also like to make a decent living. And he's the only one now that I have any reference for what I could potentially do. So maybe I want to pivot a little bit. So I think maybe AOL was probably a big then. So I got on AOL. I started looking on whatever the internet was at the time, and this biomedical engineering degree popped up. I had no idea what it was. I started researching and looking into it, and it was a fairly new major at the time. There were only a few, just not a ton of accredited universities that had accredited programs, and Marquette University was one of them. So I applied there and thought, okay, I'm becoming an engineer. I like biology and physiology. I don't necessarily really want to be a doctor just because at the time my schooling didn't particularly appeal to me. But I like the science behind it. So I'll do this. I'll maybe get a job at like in a medical device company or maybe at Nike designing like shoes or things that deal with the body. I'll be some type of engineer. I thought that would be cool. I got an internship working at a paper company making diapers, and I was sitting and people probably don't realize, but diapers are made on massive machines that are full warehouse length size machines where you're running the first layer and in the second you're adding the absorbent material in pockets, then you're attaching the waistband. So at my internship, my job was one large part of it was looking at the machine as it was applying the waistbands to make sure it was applying them in the right amount of stretch so that when it was done, it would give you that elasticity on the waistband that you need to stay up on the baby correctly. And I routinely failed at that on that diaper plant at that machine, and people saw it. And I was like, yeah, I am not so interested. Like, I like the science in general, but I don't know if I can be an engineer just working on one small aspect of this major, endeavor. So I said, I think I maybe need to apply my love for science in a little bit different way because this isn't working.
I mean, that is such like a clear and direct sign from the world
Mm-hmm.
that I should not be doing this, right? It's
Yeah.
not like in between. It's literally like I cannot stay awake. And I think that is actually a good like example for a lot of people, right? I mean, I remember working at jobs in college and in high
Mm-hmm.
school that I dreaded being at, right? And it
Yeah.
was because you're like, this is the most boring thing I've ever done. And I get some people have to do that and you do what you need to do to take care of your family. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can make choices, try to find something that you're not going to fall asleep at. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's
Just
pretty straightforward.
yeah.
But
That's
but
the tagline for this podcast for me. My great advice: find a job where you don't fall asleep, and you'll be
please
successful.
hire Jamaal Jordan, the guy who fell asleep at a
Yeah.
diaper plant,
Yeah.
but he somehow made it here.
Yeah. Right. I woke
But
up
you know,
and made it here.
I guess it's probably good you didn't end up working there because I'm sure the diapers would have gone sideways as you fell asleep, or maybe you would have gotten like engulfed in the diaper machine, probably.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah. Who knows?
that is hilarious. As you figured that out, is that what led you to law school then?
Yeah. Um. So my older brother still is attorney, and was at the time also in intellectual property patent law. So I had a little bit of knowledge for what he did. Um, Not a lot, but a little bit. So, but that experience, and then my senior design project, or not project, senior design class, there was an individual who came in and spoke about ways that you can use your degree, and one of them was patent law. So those two things made me decide. I think even though what I knew about being a lawyer, like I'm more introverted. I'm not a super big talker. Like I was like, I don't know if I want to be a lawyer from what I understand, but getting more information and learning about it, I was like, okay, I think that might actually be something that suits my personality and what I like to do. So it's so far been going all right.
I think it ended up being a nice fit, and all the lucky people that Jamaal Jordan decided to do this instead of be a diaper man, I think are benefiting from it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, enough said on that.
Right.
So, As we close out this lovely podcast, I try to bring it back to a couple places. One is um, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're an inventor, um, what's the easiest way to figure out how to find somebody to help you with a patent? Because there's seemingly lots of patent lawyers and lots of firms. So is there something you look for or?
Yeah, man. That's a good question because I wish I had a really great answer for that because here's what's happened. Over the course of my career, I've had people contact me. They're like, and they were, and I don't know what they did. It was just random people. Some of them weren't even local, and they would just say, "I found you, found your web. I've got an idea." Some of them have been good clients, some of them have been not so good clients. But I think in this age, technology, the internet, and Googling is will get you where you need to go. I think the correct answer, or at least what I can think of, is it's buzzwords. You've got your industry. If you can look for patent lawyer, mechanical, electrical, or chemistry, you're going to be able to, if my idea, my process falls in one of those two, three broad buckets. It's primarily mechanical products, primarily a mechanical product, or it's having to do with biochemistry. You Google those types of things, you'll find attorneys in your market that do that. They'll be in their intellectual property department, and they'll show that they have degrees, and they've practiced generally in that space. But yes, rather than just looking at the more general companies that are not law firms that are just trying to kind of quickly and easily get you a patent. If you are looking at law firms in your area, and those attorneys that are in intellectual property, that practice patent law, and they've got some type of expertise, whether it be schooling or in practice and experience in your technology field, you're going to be in good hands with who you find, most likely.
We've talked today a lot about finding meaning in your work, what helps you stay motivated and focused. What is the thing that drives you every day to get up, do your job, be there for your family, be the best father you can be and husband?
Yeah. Wow. All right. Personally, I mean, obviously, it's your family, it's the people who depend on you. But I think you can't do all that unless you have a constant need to just improve upon yourself. Like I've whether it be through practice, through work, or through exercise, or through listening to podcasts and just learning and evolving in your knowledge. Like I've always sought out being uncomfortable. So whether that, like I said, whether that be exercise regimen or putting myself in situations that I'm not necessarily inclined to do or I don't have a natural affinity to do. So I'm just driven by improvement, and by doing that, I'm always finding myself in ways that I can improve myself, improve those around me, and if I'm doing that, I'm not staying. Usually, good things will happen.
I think the universal connection point of everybody I've talked to so far on this podcast is an internal drive to improve physically, mentally, learn, better the world in some manner and capacity. Um, I don't know if it says something good about me or if I just stumbled on people that seemingly do this, but I think it's so important and it's something that I've been trying to instill in my daughter and to varying levels of success so far. But she's not even 4 yet, so I got some
Yeah.
time.
No.
Uh, as we close up the podcast today, you know, that seems like a good place to end. And I'm just curious if there's any other closing thoughts you would want to give our audience about how they can find meaning and success in their life.
No, I mean that you summed it up really well. I think anytime that you have something other than yourself to live for, to work for, some goal to reach for, you just avoid the urge to remain stagnant. I mean, as long as you've got something you're doing it for, you've got a target you're shooting at, you're usually going to do all right. Maybe you find out sometime down the road, maybe I should have. That time wasn't lost. You've learned, you've gained experiences. As long as you're moving towards something, you'll eventually get to where you should be.
Where can people find you? Are you on LinkedIn? Do you have like a million person Instagram reels?
No, I've yet to go viral on any social media platform. I've got a Facebook that's Jamaal Jordan. I've got an Instagram that I think is also Jamaal Jordan. I am on LinkedIn. And if you look for Jamaal Jordan and a guy in a suit, there's a good chance that it's going to be me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much today for taking the time and looking forward to the next time we chat.
Yeah, all right. Likewise, this was fun.